And one of the things that I love about doing this show, I get to meet so many wonderful people and so many types of personalities have joined me on the brunch set. And today is no different. One of the things that I absolutely love, oh, bit of a tongue twister there, actually love, is the fact that I meet from politics, politicians to activists, revolutionaries, historians, oh my, performers, entertainers, creatives, in all aspects. And this is one of the things that I actually love about doing this show. Now, for me, I have been around the arena of performance, art, culture, history. I've been around so many wonderful and intelligent minds. And of course, my first guest is no different. He is a historian, he's a revolutionary, he's an entertainer, calypsonian, and one of the intelligent sons of Tobago. And we are so privileged and honored in having him here today. I welcome to the brunch set Mr. Opoku Ware. Good morning to you, sir.
Present, good morning, beautiful, good morning.
And it's a wonderful time to have you. We have so many things. Carnival season is approaching. I know that you are so much involved in culture here in Tobago. But let's go back just a bit to where it all began for you. Tell me where it all began for you.
Well, nothing or no one can be judged outside the time that they live in, they
Right.
lived in,
Mm-hmm.
living in. And the sum total of your work is what defines you in
Mm-hmm.
the end, you know. But like any other youth, I think I grew up like in the 60s and stuff, which was a kind of turbulent time in terms of the world itself was in a state of change,
Mm-hmm.
because we were coming out of the colonial era where we were totally uh, dominated by European slavery and colonization.
Right.
Because slavery might have ended in 1838, 34, but the colonial rule continued where we trying to beg another Caribbean island, other third world countries
Mm-hmm.
were directly ruled by European powers, whether it was Britain, France, or Holland, or whoever controlled the influence in that particular
Mm-hmm.
era. So that what's happening in the 60s is that the world was dominated by Europe and the rising power of America. In fact, after the Second World War, America became the dominant world power.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it, so that we in Trinidad and Tobago living under colonial rule. Colonialism is one where you believe that something foreign is superior to you.
All
So
right.
we had this concept that anything that coming from outside was better than what we had. Even in terms of our own selves as African people living in the diaspora or any part of the world,
Right.
we started to believe that we were inferior, or we were made to believe over centuries that we were inferior to other peoples. So, for example, we reached the point that everything black was bad. The mighty composer have a song called Black Fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
We say everything bad, a black sheep, a black cat, everything is seen as, derogatory. And we had reached the stage where we used to curse one another until we look at you're black and ugly and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. Um, so the 1960s saw people from different parts of the world demanding their space on planet Earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you had in Southeast Asia, or before that, you had like in 1947, after the Second World War, the first country that attained independence was India, through the struggles of Mahatma Gandhi and so on.
Right.
At the same time, the people in China was a poor, uh, oppressed, suffering reign throughout China. If you saw a picture of China during the 50s. But a guy called Mao Zedong led the Chinese Revolution He took over the Chinese Revolution, which was begun by a father called Sun Yat-sen since in the 1920s. But in the 1940s and 50s, Mao was able to rise and unite China and, and forge the Chinese Revolution in 1949. So China became a People's Republic in 1949, and they emerged from that. And gradually, over the years, now they have risen to be probably the most powerful nation in the world, arguable the
Mm-hmm.
most powerful nation in the world. So, so you had in that part of the world, in Southeast Asia, like the Vietnamese fighting for the independence. They had defeated the French in 1954, and they were now fighting the Americans for control of Vietnam, led by a guy called Ho Chi Minh. Now, on the other hand, you had like in Africa, you had the African liberation struggles, like in South Africa, Namibia, Angola, um, Guinea-Bissau, and so on,
Mm-hmm.
being waged by Africans in Zimbabwe and which was called Rhodesia, and South Africa, not forgetting there, where you had the Europeans had dominated Africa. In 1884, they sat down in what you call the Bandung Conference, and they carved up Africa into different parts. So they said, okay, in the Berlin Conference, sorry, in the Berlin Conference in 1884 in Germany, France, you take that, England, you take that, Dutch, we take that, you take that, so and so, you take that. And Africa was divided and all kind of mad boundaries was established among the country. But the important thing is that the power, the real power in Africa was now Europe. So all the gold, all the minerals, whether it's silver, diamonds, whether it's uranium,
All the
all the
treasures,
yeah, all the land, the fertile
resources.
land were controlled by Europeans. So that was happening there. While in the United States, the African Americans who got their freedom in the 1860s, the slavery ended in the 1860s in America. They were rising up because the Americans, revolutionaries, the Americans led by people like George Washington and Jefferson and them fellas, Patrick Henry and so, they ran the British out of America. And because they said they're not paying no tax to the British king, no taxation without representation, what they cry, liberty or death. That is what the Americans, the white Americans did. And they overthrew and they established the United States of America, which first was 13 colonies that expanded to now 50 something. Now, but they form a Bill of Rights. The Americans had a Bill of Rights, but in those Bill of Rights, the African American had no rights. So as a black fella in America, just as in South Africa, it had you couldn't you couldn't sit down in the same park with a white man, you couldn't drive on the same bus with them, you couldn't go to the same schools. You know, you was discriminated then. And then in the 1960s, you know, there's this rise of the Black Power movement in the United States, led by people like H. Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael. Malcolm X was one of the pioneers of the movement. And Malcolm X, who had roots in Grenada, his grandparents. Stokely Carmichael was from Trinidad and Tobago, from Corey Street in East Dry River, and he migrated as a little boy to America, and he rose to become one of the leaders of the movement in America for change in the 1960s. You had people like the Black Panther Party, which was Rap Brown and them guys, and they were a kind of radical movement, whereas Martin Luther King, who emerged around that period too, he was more believing more integration. He was not radical as say Stokely, Malcolm, and Rap Brown. But they rose up and because of the power of America, the message of black power and the movement for change that black people must have their space in the world started to penetrate different parts of the world, just as the Marcus Garvey movement did in the 1930s and 40s. Because Garvey was a Jamaican who formed an organization called the UNIA that had 111 branches throughout the world. That was in the 30s, so that had a surge of consciousness. Now, we were saying in the 1960s, now was another surge of consciousness in the United States, and that found its way into Trinidad and Tobago, and so because around that time in late 1960s, there were a number of Caribbean students going to a school called the George Williams University in Canada. And they were complaining about discrimination and so on. And they, they protested against the white racism at the university. And in the protest, they, they barricaded themselves because they said the grades was being deliberately lowered because of the skin color and so on. They barricaded themselves in the computer room. And during the riot, a lot of things were destroyed and so on. And a lot of Caribbean students were arrested and they were threatened with jail and so on. So that incident in Canada ignited the movement in Trinidad, where you had people like Mukanda Daga, Geddes Granger, Dave Dabu, who is Kapra Kambon now, and so on, leading the NJAC movement in Trinidad, protesting against the possible suppression of our students in Canada. But when the movement started in Trinidad in April and in February 1970, it was about the students. But then the government at that time, led by Eric Williams, the PNM government, they arrested about 12 of the demonstrations, a number of the demonstrators, and charged them under a 1844 law. If they were found guilty, because they claimed that they went into the Catholic Church and put black cloth over the white statues and so on, right? So they said they desecrated the church, so they charged them. But if they were found guilty on that charge, they could have lost an arm or an ear and get some years in jail. That was the law that was on our books, our law books, even though it was 8 years after independence.
But one of the things that I wanted to really ask you, I'm so glad that you're here. You have given us so much history since sitting with me this morning. Where are we in our Black consciousness today, in your opinion? We have so many pioneers that fought for us and trailblazed and opened our awareness. But in your opinion, where are we today with Black consciousness?
The thing about Black consciousness and the struggle to uplift our people's minds and so on, it wouldn't happen overnight. You see, we spent more time in slavery. We spent from about the 1500s to about 18 something in slavery. That's 300 and something years or more. And out of slavery, we just out of slavery 100 and something years, you know. And those years we spent in slavery was when the slave masters used the skill and the power and authority they had to turn us, to strip us of our values, the way we see things, the way we see life, the way we treat our women, the way we treat our children, the way we build a family life, the way we relate to our culture. They took away a language, give us their language. Everything we did was a carbon copy of them. We mimic them in every way. For example, today, we live in Tobago today, and we celebrating with J.D. Elder and these fellas came up with this thing about Heritage Festival. And they still have us celebrating a Heritage Festival with people wearing a massa long coat, massa top hat, and showcasing that to the world. Absolute nonsense. These things must be taken and dumped in the waste paper basket of history, because what you are doing is inculcating into the youth of Tobago a kind of mimic mentality, because what we doing at that time, in those days during slavery, you couldn't, the little massa had to have that one massa throw away and you put on, you know. So when you start to mimic the master, you are degrading your own self-worth as a human being. Our people are a proud people. Our people fought for centuries against domination. In Africa, there was a woman called Queen Nzinga. She fought and defeated the Portuguese 7 times, you know. So the point I was trying to make is that over the years, even though we have a surge of consciousness at one time, then the oppressors counterattack, and they will bring something then to submerge that culture. Because, for example, in 1970, we were talking about, because before 1970 was fry here, you know, pressy and straighten here and thing, right? And then we had to counter that so that women start using afro and all this kind of thing, right? But then they come back now and they counter that and then they straight here and they weave and all that thing come back, right? Not the braids because you know African people is the first people to do braids and stuff. Now, and then it reached a point now where somebody, a woman was telling me that day, she said, well, you know, if I open a place, I open a place selling bleach. I said, what do you mean? She said, I go sell it now. Because our women, we, they so, they have been conditioned to believe that the fairer you look, that is constitute your beauty. So they'll try to destroy their God-given black is beautiful skin to bring something, the whiter shade appeal or something like that. So the point is that we have to always continue to strive and try to educate our people as much as possible. Because let me tell you something. Before 1970, most people here didn't have African names, you know. But now, if you look around, a lot of people, thousands of people have African names. So that is a start. It might be people might say that's no big thing, but if you could start referring yourself as an African, like Makida or if your name Keisha or something, gradually that is one step, you know, one small step. And then there are other steps you would have to take, you know. Um, for example, some of us change our names. We um, dumped the slave name we had and we went by the lawyers and we changed our name legally. You know, all these are small steps. And gradually, as different times come about, new leaders would come about and new surges in consciousness would come. So we might have moved from here to there in the struggle during chattel slavery because Tobago revolt more than any other Caribbean island,
Oh,
stand up
yes,
and fight,
we did.
all them in Plymouth, Sandy and all them fellas.
Yes.
And we are and 90s during the Butler era we reached another point. Then when this guy came, when Dagandi came in 70, we went to another point.
And speaking of other points, we have so many things that we want to speak to you about, Opoku, but we're going to take a break and we're going to be right back with more Brunch, a Taste of Tobago. See you guys soon. Having such a wonderful conversation. You know, we made the point, Opoku, that our history, our story was rewritten and broken up so many times, too many times to mention, as a matter of fact. Yeah, and it left us grasping for some form of identity. Do you think that's why we our leaders, in the past mimicked the slave master,
Yeah, we see.
mimicked the English
Yeah,
tendencies?
that one of the problems with the third world, a lot of some more audience because of colonialism, because they believe that they so believe in the master that they adopted the culture of the oppressors. They adopted the lifestyle of the oppressors. For example, look at the president of India, Modi. Modi always wear his cultural wear. Look at Mahatma Gandhi. When Gandhi went to India for independence, Gandhi landed in India, in England with a capra and barefoot and went to talk to the British. But all leaders would have the jacket and tie, you know. You know, but it just shows that the battering that we got, because them guys who call themselves leaders, they come through that whole period of colonial battering to their minds, so they can't really represent as they should represent, you know. That is why when you look at the Caribbean, people talk about Miyamoto. Well, Miyamoto just talk some kind of half-conscious thing and so on. And well, she and the boy in Guyana, if an alliday are some of the more progressive in terms of thoughts, you know, but basically most of our leaders were neo-colonialists, you know, they are just following the value system of our oppressors, and that is one of the reasons why we're here. And then when our true leaders come up now, emerge, they, they, they fight them down and they destroy them because some of our greatest leaders in the world, Stokely died young. H. Brown, Malcolm X assassinated at 39 in the Caribbean here when Maurice Bishop was rising up. They
Yes.
got some stupid fellas who call themselves Marxists to kill him. I know that Makanda, that I know the kind of struggles he went through because he said actually lived at his spouse in love until for a period, you know.
Right.
So a guy like Uriah Butler who was standing up, you know, the ostracized Butler. Butler is the man who caused me to be working 8 hours a day. He fight for them things.
Yes, he
Things
did.
like free secondary education. The first man who started talking about independence long before Williams. And they lock up Butler for squatting on a piece of Crown land. They put him in jail for that. I saw Butler about 3 days before he died. We went down Faisabad the same day, library. And Butler died in poverty. You know what I mean? So that when you take up, you have to make up your mind that if you take up a thing of consciousness to battle for your people rights and thing, you are not to get, you know. Or I mean Tony McFarlane, who used to lead the struggle in Tobago in 1970, he said, "Worry, all you'll get is a kick in your pants, you know."
Yeah.
When, you know, so we have good brothers who come up, brothers who make a contribution. Because, like for example, in Tobago in 1970, it was a wonderful movement. Thousands and thousands of people used to be on the street marching. We marched from town to Mount Irving, because at that time Mount Irving was owned by the British. They had the British flag flying higher than the national flag, and we protested against that. That time they didn't used to allow black people to play on the golf course. We protested against that. Then we went to the other demonstration by sea to Pigeon Point to protest the fact that the big hotel owners were taking over the traffic to the reef and leaving out the locals, local boat owners. Then we marched to Pigeon Point to demand that Pigeon Point be handed back to the people here because, you know, you had to pay to go in there. I think they're still doing that foolishness down there. I don't know how you could charge people for bathing on something that God created. Then we marched to Charlottesville to protest the conditions of life. I mean, if you know, like going up in, when we marched up there in 1970, the road wasn't fit for donkeys to travel on. We marched through Bethel, we marched through Patience Hill, you know, all those places. I mean, thousands of people. We marched to Paltavere, you know. And then Tobago was mobilized and ready for the thing. And then in Trinidad, when the Indians were, because the Africans in Trinidad had marched down Caroni to look for support, and then the Indians responded because Daga went down there, and the Indians decided to support to march in town on the 21st of April, and Eric Williams declared a state of emergency and arrested hundreds of people, brutalized a set of people, all lock up all the leaders and so on. We were in the jail, in the cell over here.
And it's like it's like an ongoing
Well, it's an ongoing thing
struggle, yeah?
because after 1970, that was the most brutal part of it, 1970 to about 1978. When every morning you might wake up in your house and see machine gun down in your face, police. You know, sometimes you couldn't sleep in your house, you had to run to the hills to hide, and you had to be constantly on the move because at that time the state had counterattacked. When we were protesting and saying power to the people, we want control of the resources of the country. We want control of the oil. We want control of the sugar. We want control of the banks and insurance companies because at that time they used to have black people working in banks. We wanted black people to control the police because at that time the police was led by white people and so on. They counterattacked and unleashed the police on us. You know, and they call you gorilla, call you all kind of things. So men had to hide, men had to defend, and a lot of people, after 1970, most of the leaders abandoned the struggle. It is only Tony McFarlane who stood up, and I would always say that he stood up like a man.
Right.
And he used to take me around to the different villages, me and a brother called Elinga, Leroy Lance, and show us, you know, educate us, give us history, because he was a graduate of the George Williams University in history, you know. So I got a lot of information from him. And he's the one who kind of grounded us into the basics of understanding struggle. And those days we used to read plenty. We used to go in the library and read every book. And then the revolutionary book, the consciousness books, like by this brother from Guyana who they killed. Walter Rodney. Grounding with My Brothers, we read that. We read books from Ben Buchanan. That is an Ethiopian professor who do a lot of research on African history. We read books by Chancellor Williams, not Eric Williams, a guy from America who wrote on this to show you how the African civilizations were destroyed because, we were the first civilized people on planet Earth. That build the pyramids, that build glorious cities and empires and so on. Um, and then, so we read all those books, so that helped to build our consciousness. And then when we link with Enjak in Trinidad, Makandal, Dagan, Cambon, and they helped to lift our consciousness here, those who stood around, because we had to try to rebuild a movement here during the 1970s. Going on the blocks, get brothers and so on, and rebuild because the old leadership had gone. And then
But I think you understood that the struggle was so important that you were ready to take all of that backlash and all of that,
yeah,
the stuff that came afterwards.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because you decided that, okay, somebody needs to stand up, somebody needs to
Yeah,
fight.
when you make a commitment, look here, boy, suffering, you had to go through, you know what I mean? I was arrested in 1974, after 1970, with the Moran brothers, Mohini brothers,
Yeah.
and we were beaten mercilessly by the police and dropped off in Hope at night. And, you know, and I tell you, you're in a police station and 8 men beating you one time, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a
When you
whole
experience that,
lot.
when I say surreal, when you remember them kind of things. But that is and you have to take that, because you commit yourself to that. Is, as the Americans were saying in the revolution, liberty or bones. It's either we get some freedom or we dead. We have to make up your mind for that. So that, and then even as you live your life, you have to continue in any way you could to educate your people, because what our people need is real education to understand who we really are. Because them brothers who running around with guns shooting one another, they don't know that they come from a people that civilized Europe. The first university in Europe was built in Salamanca and Spain by Africans. They don't know that Africans left Africa, come down here thousands of years before Columbus and helped to develop the Inca and Aztec Empire. They don't know that. A guy called Abu Bakr left. He was the head of Ghana, the Gold Coast Empire. And he abandoned his throne, gave it up to Mansa Musa, who is revealed as the richest man in the world that ever lived. Mansa Musa, Abu Bakr, he came down here with 2,000 ships before Columbus.
Yes.
And even Columbus ship was an African guiding the ship, African navigator. So they don't know anything. So you left them empty. You go to the schools today and you see, as a children fighting in school. They must fight. They don't know anything. We're not educating the people. What are you teaching the children in school? Is African history part of the school curriculum? Our people are psychologically now disoriented. That's why man killing man just so. That's why people you wake up in your house and somebody come in there to rob you. Because they all over the place. And not only that, you have to educate them, but you have to provide in the society the material needs for them to survive and live as human beings. You cannot have a society where the bulk of the power and the material resources going to a few people while you have many suffering.
And one of the things that you said that just stood out to me is that you cannot live in a society where the bulk of the resources, the wealth, everything that you can think about for development and upliftment is going to a certain few. And that brings me to my next question really quickly before we wrap. We're almost out of time. Your entry into Calypso. Let's just
You
talk
know,
a bit about that.
well, the thing with Calypso is that Calypso is an African art form. It came from Africa with our people, where the people go from community to community spreading the message of life in song. That's what Calypso is, the messages of life in song. And it came down from Africa with our foreparents. And growing up and thing, you know, ye- in the glory days of Calypso, when you had the Sparrows, the Crystals, the Bombers, the Blakies, when Calypsonians used to run their own Calypso tents, and when you hear the Calypsonians coming over here, it's a big thing. So big show in town, big show in
In
Roxborough.
Roxborough. Yes, I
And
remember those
then,
days.
but I had always loved Calypso, but then I had the opportunity to, when I went into NJAC, we started having cultural rallies. So I had rallies in Mason Hall, Goodwood, Charlotte, but all over the place, having cultural rallies, Bethel, all them places. And we used to have Calypsonian, Steel Pan, and so on playing. And in 1975, I did the first major promotion with Stalin, Shadow, Valentino, and Tobago Rio, and I think the seven band. We had a show at PSA, the old PSA up the thing. Then we had one down in the west and one up in the east. And the thing we did that during Lent, because in those days it was kind of taboo to sing Calypso during Lent. So that and from that, promoting Calypso and getting into it and associating with Makanda Jaga, who was the greatest Calypso connoisseur that I ever know, um, just get an opportunity to interact, get to know Stalin and them, and Stalin tell me go by every Calypsonian and talk with every Calypsonian. So I used to go all around Trinidad looking for Calypsonians to talk with, go home by Kitchener, go home by Sparrow, go home by Burma, so you get into them because the Calypsonian really, a true Calypsonian really a special kind of person.
And I love the fact that you were able to really get into the art form. We thank you so much for being a part and continue to educate. Don't ever stop. Continue entertaining as well and bringing our story to life, bringing our story to the people. So we just want to thank you so much, Opoku Ware, for being a part of Brunch today.
What I can say is one big love.
Yes,
One
all
big.
love, much love. Thank you so much, guys. We're going to take a break. We're going to be right back with more Brunch, A Taste of Tobago. But before we do that, our trivia question for today: other than the famous Buku Reef, name any other reef in Tobago. Our answer at the end of the show. We're going to see you guys soon. Come back. Let's have some brunch.